Hi, folks. I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ken Calvert, and welcome to the Father Joe Grimaldi podcast. I'm sitting along a fourth degree night in terms of the Knights of Columbus. And on today's podcast, we are going to give a shout out to the Knights of Columbus. The Father Joe podcast is proudly supported by Hoot McInerney Star Lincoln, 12 Mile Road, east of Telegraph in Southfield. Want to talk to you about the all-new 2019 Lincoln Nautilus with a fuel economy rating of 27 miles per gallon, 22-way adjustable seats, a Rebel audio system, a panoramic Vista sunroof, and an absolutely incredible tech package. Make sure to ask about instant savings going on right now. Those savings are available as well on the full lineup of Hoot McInerney Star Lincolns, including the Lincoln MKC. I've been in it a lot, and I love it. Stop on by and make sure you tell them you heard about Star Lincoln on the Father Joe podcast. Hoot McInerney Star Lincoln on 12 Mile Road, just east of Telegraph, or visit starlincoln.com. Okay, the Knights of Columbus. I was once offered an opportunity to join the Knights of Columbus Club that was in Hamtramck. A very good friend of mine, Matt Dobeck, very, very active in the Knights of Columbus. And then my father was in the Knights of Columbus. My uncles were all in the Knights of Columbus. And they all went to this place, and it was called, Monahan Hall. I can't believe I remembered the name. Monahan Hall. And they would meet at Monahan Hall, I believe it was in Detroit, every Friday about 4 o'clock. And they would discuss good things over a couple of adult beverages. They liked to have a nice meal with the family on occasion, but especially with my mother. My mom and dad would often spend an evening dancing the night away at the Knights of Columbus. So today we're going to talk about our friends, the Knights of Columbus. Several degrees? You're a fourth degree? So I'm assuming if I were to join right now, I'd be a first degree knight.
Correct, yeah.
Then a second?
Third.
Then a third. Then a fourth.
Fourth, that's it.
And then Carl's already got the job.
Supreme.
The Supreme Knight, and they have a big building in New Haven, Connecticut.
Correct.
Big insurance company.
Correct.
So, but let's talk about the Knights of Columbus because they raise a fortune for the Catholic Church and for needy charities.
Yeah, I think one of the things is very often we take them for granted because they tend to do a lot of little fundraisers in the parishes, whether it be the pancake breakfast that they have every so often, or whether it be selling Tootsie Rolls or whatever the case might be. But they do a lot of good because the money that they collect certainly has helped build many buildings within parishes, has helped to organize situations with the diocese that they work in. So they do a lot of good. Now, you know, in the Catholic Church, there are several organizations where people are knighted. For example, you have the Knights of St. Sylvester. You have the Knights of Malta. But those are kind of the crown jewels, if you want, of all the knights that exist. And they do contribute quite a bit of money, but mostly it is for the preservation and the development as much as they can of the Holy Land. And they do things of that sort. So
they raised over $200 million. I mean, that's a lot.
You mean the Knights?
The Knights.
Yeah. I'm getting to that.
Okay.
No.
Sorry.
What I'm saying is this. The Knights of Columbus sometimes is looked upon as the poor man's knighthood, as opposed to the Knights of Malta. They would be the higher-ranking organization. But the Knights of Columbus are not to be
wait
so
a minute.
short.
I wasn't aware of the Knights of Malta.
Yes.
Within the Catholic Church?
Of course.
Oh, where have I been? And the other knights were what?
The Knights of St. Sylvester.
I did not know about the Knights of St. Sylvester.
Well, these are the people that go back to the Crusades, actually.
Okay, all right.
And so that they have this eminence about preservation of the Holy Land, basically. So the monies they contribute go to the Vatican and go to the Holy Land.
Oh.
Actually, the head of the Knights of Malta can be found in Rome, right near the Aventine Hill in Rome. You'll see that there is this big building for the Knights of Malta. But in any case, the reason I point those two out is that there are several organizations where people are knighted, if you want. Now, with the Knights of Columbus, they're there for the ordinary parishioner, Catholic, who wants to contribute, to the development of the church wherever that person lives. And so they do a lot of good. You mentioned yourself that they could contribute as much as $200 million in 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
And because of their hard work, they do that, how should I put it, the everyday type work just to raise a few bucks here and there. But the few bucks, they build up to a lot of bucks eventually, and they do help a lot of people. Now, in keeping with their idea of fraternity, and very often in many of the cities in the United States, you will find a Knights of Columbus Hall.
Yes.
And they even rent it out to different organizations, even for weddings and things of this sort as well. And they serve food and they serve drinks and things of this sort. But it's a place where the Knights themselves can gather too, let's say on a Friday night, and just to be with their brother Knights and talk and so on and so forth. There has been some controversy with the Knights using their swords in church. And so many of the bishops have prohibited the use of the sword. When I say the use, wearing the sword in church events. They're allowed, obviously, to dress according to their fourth degree or whatever it is that they're representing, but not with the sword, and because they don't want the idea of the sword being part of religion. So many of the bishops have said none of that. But in some places, they still have the sword. As a matter of fact, I'm sure you've seen weddings.
That's what I was going to say.
And funerals where they will hold up the sword as the people go underneath.
The sword canvas, if you will, that the bride and groom or the bride and her father would walk through. And, of course, the groom, followed by, his dog.
Whatever.
His dog, Tug, or whatever. But and also at funerals, yes. Well, I suspect everything like that would certainly be under a microscope these days.
Of course.
And I certainly understand that. But it's a nice-looking uniform that the Knights wear.
It is, yes. There's no question about that. And as they say, you can find them almost in every city of the United States. So wherever there's a Catholic presence, usually there's a group of people that are involved in the Knights of Columbus. But not just the United States, because, when you have a place like the Philippines that's so associated with the United States, they have their own Knights of Columbus and so on. It's interesting that when, having lived in Hawaii for many years, and that we have a very large population of Filipinos, many of them come and they're already Knights, and they take part of the organization that exists in Hawaii, so that you'll find the Knights of Columbus there as well. In Canada, for example, you would have the Knights of Columbus too. Why all the fanfare? Why the uniforms? Why the color and all of that? I don't know. I'm not an expert in that thing, but it gave people a sense of importance, if you want.
Yes.
Particularly when many people come from European countries originally, where you have royalty. And when you have royalty, there's always people are dubbed as knights of one order or another. And so that, seeing that as a feather in your cap, if you want, sometimes literally from what they wear.
Yeah, I was going to say, those hats have a lot of feathers. Yeah.
So people figured that would be one way of attracting members. The other thing, too, very often people associate the Knights of Malta and Knights of St. Sylvester, and those are associated with people that have a lot of money.
Oh.
And whereas the Knights of Columbus is for the ordinary Joe, okay? It's not just people that have a lot of money. It could be anybody that wants to join the Knights of Columbus. They can.
Well, let's go back to its founder, as a matter of fact. It's a Father...
McGivney?
Yep, Father Michael J. McGivney, who was the assistant pastor of St. Mary's Church in New Haven, Connecticut, which is now their headquarters. He goes back to the 1880s.
Correct.
And he's up for sainthood.
Correct.
You have a degree in canon law. How do you feel about him being canonized a saint?
Well, I think that's great. I mean, I have no idea. I don't know the details on his life, but obviously he lived a very altruistic type of life. He wanted to make sure that people were reaching out to others, and I think he instilled those ideas in the first few group of the Knights of Columbus. He's the founder of the Knights of Columbus. And therefore, because of all the good that he did at that time, I think the members of the organization would like to see him canonized.
Do you happen to know why it's the Knights of Columbus?
I don't know exactly. I have a feeling that it has to do with the founder of the United States, the founder of America, if you want, the would-be founder. I know there's questions about who the founder is, because one of the things the Knights emphasize is God and country, and so that when you speak about country, it was originally American, and so, the Philippines certainly a part of it now, but it was American when it was founded, and the whole idea was to be patriotic towards your country, but also to maintain your allegiance to the church as well.
Yeah, church and country, basically, but all the charities within the church, and of course outside the church. They're powerful players with the handicapped. That's one of the areas that they certainly hone in on. But they're so philanthropically minded when it comes to all of the charities, and it's not unusual at all. I remember the Jerry Lewis telethon. Every Labor Day weekend, you would always see an enormous check from the Knights of Columbus. And so they're always there willing to do a little bit extra for everybody else, which once again is a subset to what we're all supposed to be doing on a regular basis, and it fits in perfectly with almsgiving this time of year, Lent, of course. So hats, no pun intended, but our hats off to the Knights of Columbus. I had a very dear friend of mine, Paul, Uncle Buck, and we worked together at a radio station, WCSX. And Uncle Buck, of course, on Friday nights during Lent, they had the perch fish fry. And oh gosh, he was large and in charge of the deep fryer, okay? Stand back. Uncle Buck is in charge. And I said to him once, Friday I'm on the air, I'm salivating like crazy. He's telling me his secret recipe. And we swapped chili recipes once, okay? So I've always tried to get that perch batter recipe out of him. Oh, he won't give it up. He won't give it up to anyone. Not even a fourth-degree knight, he said, can get my perch recipe. So, good for him. But he's working his way to the top, I know desperately. I kept saying, when do you get the hat? When do you get the hat? And he would laugh a little bit. But no, he was very serious and always the first guy to help out wherever he could with anything, not just with the Knights of Columbus or his church. But it speaks volumes to the background of the Knights of Columbus. And it's very rare that we mention those groups, and we'll be mentioning more throughout the year. I'm wondering if it's gender-friendly. Are there females in the Knights of Columbus?
There may be. I'm not really sure, but there is a group called the Daughters of Isabella, which kind of makes sense. Columbus being sent to explore the New World by Queen Isabella. And so it's a relationship that was established there. But in any case, it's a group that's an auxiliary group to the Knights of Columbus. However, I must say this, you don't see too many of them around today. There must be, I'm told that there are almost 50,000 people who are these Daughters of Isabella.
Yeah.
But I don't know much about them, to be honest.
What are some of the...
Well, I know that, for example, when you speak about the Knights of Malta, there are the Dames of Malta as well, which would be the women.
Okay.
And the Knights of St. Sylvester, again, you have the Dames. They wear those white capes as opposed to black and all of this other stuff.
Sure. Getting back to the Knights of Columbus, when can a young man decide he would like to be in the Knights of Columbus? How old do you have to be? Are there age restrictions? Do you know, Father Grimaldi?
Teenagers have what they call the Squires.
Oh.
And so the Squires are before becoming a knight, if you want. And so those are usually people who are young. They could be high school, they could be college, but it's people that are wanting to be part of the Knights of Columbus, and they call them the Squires. Now, I don't know the exact age group, when it starts, when it ends, or whatever that might be, but there are the Squires, which would be the young men.
Now, when you get back to the Knights of Columbus, that's our topic. When you get back to funerals, for example, what is it that they do at a funeral?
Ordinarily, they would keep vigil. Now, very often, if it's a priest who is being waked, then the knights will take turns by the hour, keeping vigil by the casket as the people come and pay their respects. And also, when the funeral takes place, very often the knights can be part of that. I think that's at the request of the individuals. I don't think it's automatic, because some people may not want that, okay? But some people do. And so it can happen.
And at weddings, again, that's something that would normally be a request by the wedding
very
party.
Rare, yeah. Very rare.
It is that rare. And what about at various, let us say, a high mass, and especially on major feast days, coming up, for example, on Easter, would we see perhaps the Knights of Columbus in full regale?
Yes, if the bishop requests. Now, as I mentioned before, with some bishops, they do not want swords in the church, and therefore they limit whatever the knights can do that's in the processions, if you want.
Right.
So it can happen, and it does happen.
Well, I don't think
not everywhere.
I don't think the sword is necessary in terms of it's still...
No, but I mean, it's not... they don't always do it. In other words, I would be surprised to see the knights leading the procession for Easter Mass.
Very much so, I would.
Yeah, it doesn't happen.
But I was just wondering if perhaps they would have some presence maybe on both sides of the altar. I don't remember it, but I was wondering if they would be...
Yeah, you don't usually see it. But the thing is that they can.
Uh-huh.
It's at the request, usually, of the diocese.
Would you recommend the Knights of Columbus, if you're a young man and you're a member of the Catholic Church, to at least explore? Or are you...
By all means. All means,
uh-huh.
Because they say they stand for all that is good. I mean, you're speaking about patriotism, you're speaking about God. You can't go too far wrong with that. And so that it's a strong organization that also helps others. It reaches out to others besides fostering patriotism and religion. So I think that's about as good as it gets.
I think it's just another tier that possibly would remind all of us that the important thing is to give.
Yeah.
If you have some time, make sure that you're available to, as we talk about all the time, maybe help out at that food pantry.
Sure.
Maybe help out on that bread truck. Maybe just be the one, to be the active member in your group to do these things. But it's just another little nudge in the side if you're a member of a group like the Knights of Columbus to say, hey, just for a couple of hours this Saturday, we are going to be here getting this playground ready for our kids. Spring is not too far away. So bring a rake, bring some bags, and bring some gloves and some clothes and some shoes you don't mind getting dirty.
And depending on where they are, they take on the cultural needs of the people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, in Hawaii, instead of having pancake breakfast and so on, they would have what they call huli-huli chickens. So you would have this throughout the islands, people roasting chickens. That's what huli-huli means.
Nice.
The chicken turns, and they sell the chicken. People come and buy a number of them, or just one, or just whatever the case might be. So they do whatever they can, but as they say, it usually relates to the culture of the place where they are. So it's not always going to be pancake breakfast. It can be something else as well.
Well, we wanted to give a nice shout out to our friends and all of the members of the Knights of Columbus, and thank you for all of your hard work, and thank you for what you do for your country and what you do for your community and what you do for your church. Now, a quick question for you. You were telling me that for Lent, you are giving and not necessarily abstaining, although I know that you do abstain. I think chocolate maybe was taken from your list this particular season. Are you being true? Are you being a good boy, Father Grimaldi? Are you getting out there and giving of yourself?
I don't know if I want to answer that.
Okay, well, I hope you are.
Because chocolate is awfully tempting.
Well, it depends upon that. Maybe you've just given. Now, listen.
If it's dark chocolate, it's a health issue.
That's health. That's right. The doctor wants you having that, and I remind you as well. That you can have chocolate as long as you're not stopping chocolate for the purpose of losing weight. That is not the purpose of quitting.
No, that's not the purpose of giving up.
That is not the purpose of quitting chocolate. No. But I will be checking up on you each and every week. I just want you to know that.
Yes.
All right. So with that said, I'm going to put on my hat with my frilly little feathers on it and say, that's a wrap, friends. I'm Ken Calvert, along with Father Joe Grimaldi, and we will see you next time on the Father Joe Grimaldi podcast.
I look forward to it. Thank you. This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe podcast.
If you'd like, you can email us. It's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. That's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. Simply search Father Joe Grimaldi. And thanks for listening, everyone.